Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 4 stories for you from the Tales from Tech Support subreddit. Before we start that, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. Alright, on to the stories. Let's get our nerd on. This story comes to us from FreshBasket9174, the room where technology went to die. This took place in the early 2000s after the Y2K panic had become a memory. Not that Y2K has any bearing on this story, it just sets the time frame. I was working my first true IT gig as an IT coordinator, entire IT and AV department of a public school system at the time. I loved the job and 99.9% of the people that worked there. There was a teacher there that absolutely loved technology, and I really liked her as a friend. She had a passion to inspire her students and saw technology as a way to help. Unfortunately, technology didn't like her back, but in truth, technology may have had its reasons. My first major tech support request from her was when Windows 98 stopped working for her. When I went to troubleshoot, she let me know things had been fine, then the computer stopped working. The only thing she had done was delete all the files that had not been modified in a while just to free up room. Things that ended with .dll and .sys were just taking up space. Shake my head. After explaining why that was a bad idea, rescuing her documents, and using Ghost to reload the machine, we were back in business. That event, however, was a catalyst for technology's revenge. A few months later, after upgrading a lab in the library, this teacher asked for 6 of the replaced computers for her room so she could set up a few research stations for her students. Great, I love to see tech being used, so I agree. I spent some time cleaning fans, reloading, scrapping memory from other units to make these machines fly, for the early 2000s anyway. I bring them to the room, run new network drops myself because each room only had 2, I get budget approval to have our maintenance guy get new power run, etc. All is great, and when everything is in place, I go over the new setups with her. The principal and superintendent are both happy to see old tech getting repurposed and are touting this initiative. I am golden for about 4 days. About a week after this is all up and running, I get an email that 3 of the 6 PCs are dead. I go, and sure enough, 3 of the power supplies died. WTF? I checked and 2 of the 3 were on a different new circuit, but were paired with the 2 of the 3 that didn't die. The third that died was on an old circuit, and that was the same one her teaching desktop was on. I hang my head and quickly grab power supplies from some of the scrapped units and replace them, all back up and running again. After a couple of months of peace, the technology gremlins decided to rear their heads again. This time, the onboard network adapter started failing. I cannot recall if it was 3 or 4, but within the space of 2 weeks, we had failures of many of them. I ordered some network adapter cards, installed them, then we were back up and running. Some funding became available, and I, not having learned my lesson, suggested an in-focus projector for her room might be well used. Our head of maintenance designed a custom mount for our ceiling, not dropped, and we got a projector in there. It lasted 3 weeks before it overheated and had a literal meltdown. The case melted and deformed like it had been in an oven. We sent it back under warranty, and they, unofficially, said they had never seen anything like it. They replaced it, and the replacement was working until the day I left. I heard it died the next week. When we started the rollout of laser printers to replace the inkjet ones, I held off her room as long as I could. It was not long enough. We put in an HP LaserJet 1012 series in the room in late spring. She loved it and it seemed to like her. No jams, old HP reliable. June comes and the school shuts down. Then August, hot and humid in the Northeast, rolls around and teachers come back in and start prepping for the start of school. High heat laser transfer roller and humid paper equals steam for the first few prints. Or, in this case, the perception of fire, yanking the plug, throwing the machine on the floor, and hitting it with the fire extinguisher. RIP LaserJet 1012. Our first venture into laptops was a mobile laptop cart and a Wi-Fi access point they would plug in when the cart was brought into the classroom. I knew the writing was on the wall. Despite major troubleshooting and time invested, the laptops only had about a 50% success rate in her room. Everywhere else was closer to 95%. We just gave up trying them in there after a few goes. It was self-preservation on both our parts. She left the district a short while later. The new teacher in her room did not care as much for technology, and I left soon after that. I still don't know why that room seemed to be cursed as far as technology went. I just know it was. I still think of that time fondly, and the teacher that had that room that technology went to die in. We still talk on Facebook occasionally. Technology still fears her. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Leave the Matrix. It says, some techs have the admin gene, where tech seems to just fix itself when they are around, and issues are unable to be duplicated. Some users have the anti-admin gene, and should be kept as far away from technology as possible. This one is interesting. I know they ran new lines and new circuits in this room, but I'm wondering how much voltage was going through those lines. It seems to me like there was probably too much in that room. Maybe they were too close to the main panel, not run off of a sub panel or something like that. I don't know, but it definitely sounds here like there was just too much juice going into these systems, making them not work properly and die. This story comes to us from Double Stuffed Cheez-It, a tale of two drives. This story has been unfolding for about 2 weeks now and is still ongoing. Background: I have a client who owns his own small business. We manage 3 computers, emails for 3 employees, and 2 printers. This client is an incredibly nice guy, but he is possibly the most computer illiterate person I have ever dealt with. First ticket: a remote monitoring software alerted us a couple weeks ago that our client was running out of storage space on his laptop. So we shoot him an email to let him know. He says he can't clear any space, and my boss ends up on the phone with him to discuss options. That call led to the client deciding to buy an external drive to migrate some less important data from the laptop to it. We agreed to help him move the data once he has a drive. Second ticket: client informs us that the drive has arrived, and my boss remotes into the computer to assist with migrating the data. About 30 minutes in, and he is struggling to keep the drive connected. It would show up, then disconnect. Multiple USB ports tried and nothing is working. Boss informs him to try and get a replacement cable or a different drive. Client agrees and will reach out once he has the new hardware. Third ticket: client reaches out and says he has a new cable. I remote in this time and was able to get the drive connected and showed him how to copy the data. He is excited and says he will start copying data over later that day. Fourth ticket: just an hour ago, client says he is not sure all the data copied and doesn't want to delete it from his computer yet. I remote back in and go check if all the data copied over. Drive starts disconnecting again. He swears he is using the new cable and does not know why this is happening. I ask the standard questions about if it is securely connected on both ends, is there anything pressing against the connections, etc. All clear. I finally get a chance to look at the properties of the external drive and see it says 15 terabytes total space. Red flag number 1. I ask where he got the drive. He says it was online but can't remember where. Red flag number 2. I then ask him how much he paid for it. He says it was about $150. Red flag number 3. So I tell him I think he has a fraudulent defective drive, and I cannot recommend continued use of the drive. I tell him that a 15 terabyte SSD does exist, but it would not cost only $150, and that if he was able to get it to work and continue to try and copy data over, he would almost certainly lose data eventually. I ended up sending him a link to a run-of-the-mill 2 terabyte drive and told him to just purchase that from a local office supply store. Hopefully we can finally copy his data to the external drive in the 5th ticket. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called JustKing1414. It says, It honestly shocks me, storage has changed over the years. My first computer had about 30 gigabytes of memory total. I couldn't even imagine needing 2 terabytes of storage back then, even if I bought every game I could. Could you imagine if this guy wasn't just copying things over but was doing a cut and paste, and all that data was being removed from the computer onto that external drive? Oh no. I learned the hard way myself that you definitely don't buy hard drives or flash drives from AliExpress. Just don't do it. This story comes to us from Whiskey Tequila Finance. How we mostly saved our data center with swamp coolers. This tale of epic arrogance takes place many moons ago when I was a baby geek barely out of college. In my organization, there was a constant feud between our plant maintenance team and our technology team over who was responsible for major equipment and infrastructure items. If it didn't fit on your desktop, plant claimed to own it, even if they couldn't tell you a bloody thing about what it actually did. As your protagonist, I was a very junior member of the latter team. This story takes place in the mainframe era when the internet came on CD and Razor phones were cutting edge tech. So if any of these details sound ridiculous because we would never do it that way, once upon a time, Padawan, once upon a time. Our story begins with an expanding office. The company was growing as they do. Unfortunately for our technology team, our cobbled together data center was smack in the middle of a coveted building. Our real estate was targeted to be redeveloped into prime office space for our exec team. We were being evicted from our comfortable nest of chaos into an adjacent building, with the promise of a larger data center, better coffee, the whole works. We grumbled, but not overly much. At least in the new building, it would be harder for people to just pop by and demand to circumvent the ticket system with a quick question. I recall actually making someone fax me a printout of their error once when they claimed they couldn't figure out how to attach it to an email. Our first clue that plant maintenance were not on the same page about the move was when the new UPS systems were delivered, on a reinforced truck, with a built-in crane. That part we expected. What we didn't expect was to come outside to see the truck driver leaning up against his truck, choking back laughter at our plant team. See, they didn't want to wait on the special equipment to move the UPS system into place. They said, "It's equipment, that's our job. Besides, it's just some batteries." They promptly tried to move the units with standard hand dollies. After briefly trying to stop them, we joined the truck driver in his laughter as they proceeded to trash 3 dollies in a row before sulking back to their offices to let us finish with the right gear. We're talking about units the size of an F-150 here. We won the day, and the new UPS system was safely installed and tested on time, ready to await the rest of the data center equipment to join it. What we failed to account for were the bruised egos of the plant team who did not appreciate the geeks moving their equipment successfully without their involvement. While we celebrated, they plotted revenge. At this point in our tale, the new room itself is complete, the UPS are in and running, and our final blocker before the actual server move is to shift the air handling systems. See, neither the old nor new data center buildings were designed with enough built-in cooling power to handle our racks, so there were a pair of enormous air handlers installed to keep the room appropriately frosty. Plan A was to shift one unit several days ahead of the server move to cool the new room, and then to move the second unit early in the morning before the server move started. Half of Plan A ran fine. First air handler moved early in the week, and the room was cooling nicely. Then, around came Thursday morning, when the plant team and their boss were caught heading into the live DC with their moving equipment. Server move was Saturday during non-business hours, so we still had a live DC for 2 more days. When asked WTF they thought they were doing, we were informed that they didn't want to work Saturday morning and Friday was too busy. This move had been scheduled for months. This wasn't a last-second surprise. So they were just going to get the move out of the way early when it was more convenient to their schedules. We attempted to explain thermodynamics and what happens to $1 million servers when they overheat. We were curtly informed that the air handlers belonged to the plant team, so they were going to do it on their timeline, and we could go pound sand. The servers and networking gear were our problem to sort out. We were the geeks after all. Besides, your boss isn't here to stop us, was, I believe, the final punchline. I faintly recall some actual yelling on this one, but in the end, it wasn't like we could bodily stop them, so the last functional AC producing system was removed 48 to 72 hours ahead of schedule, with all critical equipment still under power. By mid-afternoon, the old DC had hit 95 Fahrenheit plus, and equipment started entering heat failure mode. Our boss finally returned to find us trying to cool what was left of the servers with fans and buckets of ice and dry ice. Every non-critical system was shut off and moved early to try and save the rest. In the end, we lost about $50,000 in networking gear that absolutely went chest up, but did save the actual servers. I wish this story ended with some satisfying comeuppance to the plant team responsible, but sadly, to my knowledge, they all survived without repercussions. And I, your storyteller, walked away with her first hard lesson in the utter stupidity of corporate politics and decision making. I only wish it had been the last. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called ResponsibleEnd7361. It says, for any young Padawans reading this, a good strategy is to grab a piece of paper and write, I, blank, agree that any damages caused by ignoring the advice of the IT team will be paid for by the plant budget. Then you ask who the senior person in their team is and have them sign it. If they refuse to sign, write down their name and refuse to sign but acknowledge the document. Knowing their name will be on something after you told them it is an expensive mistake is a lot more likely to cause them to pause than just telling them. We say this all the time here, document, 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 because even if you don't need it right away, one day it might save your butt. If OP had documentation here that clearly showed that the plant people knew they could be causing a massive problem, then somebody might have actually been held responsible for that $50,000 loss. I can't believe the company just turned a blind eye to it and didn't worry about it, like, come on. This story comes to us from Radar Man 2, Broadband, and Biohazard. True story, this happened to me personally. Several years ago, I worked for a well-known UK telephone broadband network. One fine sunny day, a little under a year since I'd started, and within probation period, I received a morning appointment job. 0800 to 1300 hours is when you have to be there. I phoned ahead, no answer. I drove, knocked on the door, nothing. Knocked again, nothing. Knocked again, and finally, a very bedraggled, long-haired gentleman appeared at the upstairs window. I explained who I was and watched as realization dawned on him and was invited to go through the unlocked door and to come upstairs to the flat. I reiterate, I was within my first year, still a probationer, and as such was generally worried they'd find something to get rid of me. I hoisted my tool bag and entered. As I ascended the stairs, the most horrendous smell hit me, and it only got worse the further I went. By the top step, I was retching, fearing I'd actually throw up in someone's flat. I noticed a slither of light from the window he'd answered at earlier and rushed past some boxes to open it and gulp clean air. Having composed myself slightly, fully opening the curtain, I realized that the smell had been a mix of man fell asleep on sofa every night mixed with general uncleanliness and a heavy dollop of cat feces covering the floor. I counted 17 in a square yard. The gentleman looked slightly puzzled by my dry heaving, but was mortally insulted when I held my breath and left the flat to return with latex gloves, overboots, and a half-face respirator. Think gas mask without the eye bit. A noisy line is what had been reported, so I progressed to discern the source of the noise. At the phone socket, a slightly yellowing, fluid substance seemed to be the cause of the circuit corrosion. I tentatively took a sniff and realized it was feline urine. Socket replaced, test finished, proved line clear, and then I turned to tell him the cause. "Do you want a cup of tea?" No, I don't," my brain screamed. "No thanks," my voice actually said. The noise was caused by the cats peeing on the socket. "But they go in the litter box." No, they don't. It's clean. They go everywhere else. The floor is covered in it. I'm done, say my goodbyes, and resolve to never step foot in there again. 2 weeks later, noise fault, same flat. Job comes to me because I was there last. I knock on the door wearing overboots, latex gloves, and a gas mask. He answers the door, sees me, and says, "I've cleaned since you were here." We go up. True, he has attempted to clean, but the magazines are stuck to the carpet by substances unknown. The noise fault is again due to a yellow liquid in the socket. I change it again, test everything, prove line clear, and tape a bag on the wall as a best effort attempt. 2 years later, the new tenant of the flat is having the line upgraded and is wondering why the landlady is insistent on no pets. Anybody who works a job where you actually go into customers' homes is going to realize in the first couple of homes that people sometimes live in filth. I can't even tell you how many homes I went into when I was working for the furniture leasing company that were just absolute squalor. Like crap everywhere, feces everywhere, dogs and cats and kids living in these conditions. It's just really sad, actually. Did you know every KCC video is also produced in podcast form? You can search for Karma Comment Chameleon on every major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.